Well, well, well.
Well, what?
Well, what are you waiting for?
Well, let's start the show, huh? All right, welcome back to Mickey's Corner. So what we're gonna do here today is I'm starting a new series here. This is called A Day in the Life. And what we'll be doing here is episode 1 of the series A Day of the Life is we're gonna be talking about, well pumps because I need to put in a well pump. But this series focus is going to be kind of a day in the life kind of event, like everyday problems that people face, everyday issues that people face. And I kind of figured, well, I'm gonna make a series. And this week's episode 1 will be a well pump, kind of like the well pump basics, the installation, placement, theory, and just kind of go through things to get a better idea, right? So we can all learn together. Hey, Charlie. Sorry, Charlie. Here's our well, and this is our line that goes to feed the house, the sprinklers, the hoses, everything on the property. I have it stubbed up here, 5-inch PVC well casing. And what we're gonna do is we'll be coming out of this into the pump, through the tank, and back in right here. Stay tuned to the end of the video because I do have a little bit of a surprise. And don't forget, please like, subscribe, notifications. I could really use the support. We can all grow this channel together. And yeah, let's dig right in and take a look at what we got. Okay, now that we have the depth of the well figured out, which is a simple process of a plumb bob and a string, you drop that down to the bottom of the well. That's your measurement, and that will give you the total depth of the well. Now what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna put the injector and the actual piping down the well. My target is to have my injector be 5 feet off the bottom. That'll give me plenty of room and it's safe. That still gives me plenty of head above the injector for drawdown. So let's go ahead and get this in. This is going to be my well cap. This is what's going to help hold this all in position. The well is now sealed. The piping is in the injector or in the well. Just a simple matter of tightening things up. Now let's move to the next step, which is plumbing everything together. Okay, now that we have a pump in front of us that we're going to take a look at, let's kind of look at the theory and the different types of pumps. So this is a jet pump. This is something that you would place above ground, and what it does is it draws through the suction, it draws the water from the well and comes out the discharge. Now this has 2 configurations, shallow well and deep well. When I say deep well, we have to understand there are limitations to this pump. This is more for places where your water table is shallow. So with the deep well configuration, which is what I have it designed for right now, the injector and a foot valve And you'll notice there are two lines coming out of this, and there's two lines coming out of this. Is it takes advantage of this bottom line here, will inject water into here, causing a Venturi type effect, and it will blow up your suction line through here, and it forces that water column up to about 160 feet. You'll be able to use this system. What you do need to understand about this, the deeper the well is, the lower the discharge out of your jet pump right here. This is your discharge going to your sprinklers or whatever you have. So basically, if you're in a place where your water table's 40, 50 feet, this pump will work fantastic. You don't have any worries. Let's talk about the other type of well pump. There's also what is known as a submersible pump that actually goes down into the well. You can go very deep. You can go several hundred feet deep, and the pump itself is at the bottom, so you never have to worry about your suction draw like these. With these, if you get air into the suction or you can't pull hard enough into your inlet of your pump, it'll just stall out and you'll move no water. With the submersible pump, you don't really have that issue. It all depends on your scenario and what you want to do. It's very popular to use a submersible pump. I kind of, my water table here is pretty shallow, so I decided to go with a jet pump simply because jet pumps can put out a lot of volume. Everybody needs to design their own system or make sure you talk to your local plumbers or contractors to make sure that you're making the right decisions. Let's get to the root of what we have. We basically have a suction and a discharge, and inside this housing is your impeller. Now, a submersible pump is gonna be the same way, except it's in a long, sleek package. They're 2.5, 3 inches in diameter, 18 inches long, and the water comes in the bottom and goes out the top. The pump itself has to have power provided to it from the surface. So there's some electrical connections that are all waterproof, and you make all those connections and put it right down the well. Now that we've determined what type of pump we're gonna use, what we have to look at next is the injector. So this injector sits at the bottom of the well, and you have your piping coming out of the top of this going up to your pump. This is called a foot valve, and what this is there's a check valve inside of here. So as the water is drawn in, when the pump turns off, the check valve will close, not allowing the water column in the pipe to flow back into the well. So that keeps your pump primed all the time, which is one of the major issues with these, is you lose prime. And all these fittings have to be sealed, airtight, watertight. So you got to use a little bit of thread tape or thread paste to make sure everything is nice and tight. I'm going to be using a polyline because the polyline is flexible and it's not like a rigid pipe. So my well is inside of a building. So in order to put the piping into the well or take it out of the well, it has to be flexible. That's another thing to consider. If you have a well, if you want to hard pipe it, you need to carefully consider how you're going to accomplish that in case you ever need to pull the piping out. Now that we kind of have a general idea of what we have in front of us as far as a pump is concerned, we're going to go ahead and put this in and let's see how we're going to do that. Okay, we have our holes marked for our well pump, and now all it's time to do is take a hammer drill so that we can mount this pump to the concrete to give it a nice, firm, stable foundation. Just like that. Okay, here's your pump. With this pump, the feet are cut out here and on both sides so that you can slide it into position and have it pretty close to where you want it to be. Get it started, get it set. All right, our pump is set. Nice and secure. She won't be moving anytime soon. Now let's move on to the tank and let's have a little talk about that. Now that we have the pump installed and mounted to the concrete and it's prepared to be tied into the well, next we need to talk about well tanks. Now, what is a well tank? If you're in irrigation and you're just trying to deliver water to an open end, like a sprinkler system or something like that, you don't really need a tank. If you go check on large agricultural property, a lot of times they won't have these well tanks out in the field. This is primarily to do two things, actually. It's going to deliver a constant pressure to the end, which normally is residential. These are normally used in residential. And it's going to protect the pump itself. There's a bladder inside of this, and in that bladder, it's compressed with air. It's usually compressed to 2 pounds below your low pressure cutoff, which is determined by your pressure switch. There's a pressure switch that goes on here. What you have is, as the pump turns on and off and fills this up with water, because that's what this does, this ties into your pump. As this fills up with water, it compresses that bladder inside of here. As that bladder compresses, the pressure increases. And once this fills up to a certain point where it reaches 50 pounds, 60 pounds, whatever your well is set up for, once it reaches that and the well pump turns off, this will be full of water. So now when you're inside your home and you turn on the sink and you're washing your hands, this tank will act as a reservoir. And as the water flow goes out and into your home, this bag inside of here will start to expand out. And that opposing force will create a nice pressure maintained throughout until the pressure drops below your low cutoff, at which point your pump will turn on, try to fill it back up. There's a name for that as it goes down. It's called drawdown. And that's to protect your pump and to make sure you have a nice constant supply of water coming into your home. When choosing one of these well tanks, there is a formula you can use to kind of help you, right, to choose what size you need. So you have the flow rate, which is gallons per minute. So let's say you have a 10 gallon per minute. You're gonna basically calculate on 1 gallon per minute. And if you have above 10 gallons per minute, you calculate for basically 1.5 gallons per minute to help you choose the right size of tank that you need. So let's say 20 gallons a minute. 20 gallons a minute times 1.5 is basically gonna be about 30 gallons, right? Just as a rough throw out. That kind of gives you an idea. This is a 36 gallon tank that I've chosen, but I'm gonna be running about a 20 to 25 gallon per minute. To be honest with you, you could put an 80 gallon in there. It just means your pump's gonna run longer to fill it up. If you're trying to find and really calculate to save maximum money and savings, there's that formula available to you so that you can calculate. Now that we've kind of gone over a well pump, let's go set this and see how it joins to the well pump itself, this tank right here, and kind of take a look at how far we've gotten along. Right, so now that you have your tank installed in place, it's now a simple matter of going ahead and plumbing this in. We've got our pump set, our tank set, we have our well in place, and it's time to plug all these things together and plumb it all in. And make sure you consult a local professional on sizing and power and pressure needs so that you don't find yourself in a jam. The only thing left to do after the plumbing of everything together and the setting of the pump and the well is your electrical requirements. Now, there are going to be local codes and restrictions. Get a hold of an electrician, talk to an electrician, maybe have one come out to do the final connections to your pump. Now, we're down to one more fitting and the plumbing will be complete for this project. Once we have that done, it'll be time to move on to the next process in this, which what we'll be talking about is sizing of the entire system, kind of the paperwork, the calculations, everything required to make sure that you are using the right size pump and tank. Now that we've gone through and assembled all the parts and the pieces, I figured this would be a great time to go ahead and start calculating. Now, this is something you need to do beforehand. Sizing your system, I've taken some notes here so that I won't forget, because, you know, I need to, right? It's a pretty easy formula. Your water, supply, fixture, and units, or WSFU. Now, you can Google this, and the WSFU chart is available online, and it basically will tell you every device in your home equals a certain number. So if you have like a wash machine, it may be a 2 or a 3. And if you have a toilet, it may be a 1 or a 2. A kitchen sink may be a 2. So you add up all your different utilities throughout your property and figure out exactly how many devices you have, end devices. And then you can take that numerical value, and convert it on that WSFU chart to gallons per minute. The gallons per minute is going to tell you roughly how many gallons a minute you're going to need out of a pump to cover all your devices, so that you're not undersizing or oversizing, right? So part of that formula is knowing the static level of the well. So like the well itself has a natural level it wants to stay at, and you need to measure that out. Once you do that, and you speak with the guy, your well driller, he'll be able to provide you with these numbers. Once you find this number out, then you're going to have what's known as a pumping level. And the pumping level is going to be where the well likes to sit as you're pumping fluid out. And then your recovery being its return back to static level. One more part of that too is you got to know the distance after you come out of the well, how far you need to travel to get to your home or your barn or your sprinkler system. Because what that brings up is something called a friction loss chart. You're going to look up a friction loss chart because not all piping is the same. If you have an extremely deep well, 1,000 feet, well, you can't run PVC down that well because it can only, that hang weight hanging off that wellhead, that pipe can only hang for so far before it breaks, basically, right? That PVC, it can't handle that amount of weight at the bottom. So a lot of times you're going to have to go with some type of galvanized piping. Well, that galvanized piping inside of it is a little bit rough. It's a little bit of texture inside that coating inside the pipe. Well, that causes a little bit of friction. So that's why there's a friction loss chart that's going to tell you, oh, well, PVC is this, polyline is this, galvanized pipe is this. And it'll help you to determine what size well, what size pump, what size tank. So now that we have that figured out, we got one last thing to talk about. Now, earlier I had mentioned that priming the pump is an issue with above ground pumps. So what I've created here is at the highest point, I have created a point with a plug which I can prime this entire system from top to bottom. This way, you're not just trying to prime the pump and hope that you get some grab. you're gonna have the entire system filled from this point. So you just take any garden hose, anything that you have available to fill it up from this point, and you'll be ready to go. Now it's time to prime it and start the pump. All right, I promised you a little secret at the end of the video. Well, there's one last thing I want to talk about. And you're probably like, what do rocks have to do with a well house or a well in general? What makes these rocks special, they're special rocks, is they have been tumbled and they're polished. And why does that matter? Well, it has something to do with this. I got turned on by a neighbor not too long ago about this thing called structured water. And I want to take a minute to talk about structured water. And what structured water is just like water running down a creek. Now imagine it, the process of cleansing water as it rolls over the rocks, what they have found out is that the molecules in the water actually become structured. They reorganize and become like hexagonal in shape, the material in the water itself, right? So that's part of the cleaning process when it's running down a river. I have decided to build one. And yeah, there are drawings all over the internet about this. I know this is kind of a weird off-topic thing when you're talking about, proven science. I have a neighbor and he swears by it. He's had one in his house now for 2 years, and we have a problem here with calcium in our water. And it stains everything. He's been running it for 2 years. His water is now clear. It even took the stains off the toilet bowls. I saw it with my own eyes. Calcium will freeze up your faucets and everything. It cleared it all up. And that had me convinced enough to go ahead and give it a try. And all I've done is I've taken this 4-inch by 4-foot long tube of PVC and I filled it with these rocks. So this whole thing is full. This is 48 inches long. And what it will do is it will go on the suction side of the pump coming straight out of the well right through this device. It will structure the water before it ever reaches the pump or the tank or anything else, and it should cause that to not have scale buildup. Went on Amazon, I bought 10 bags, 10 5-pound bags of polished rocks. And I just went ahead and filled up this whole tube. As you can see, it's pretty heavy. It's full all the way to the bottom. And what I've done, they make these strainers that will fit right in the top here. This is like a strainer that you would use for like a pool. So I have one of these on the bottom. It's glued into place and it's holding all the rocks in place. Then I just need to take this piece and fit it right into the top of this. And then to get to my plumbing piping, the right size, I have this piece right here. This is a 4-inch adapter. It slides right over the top. And now it gives you a female point to put your adapters. I have reducers. I have everything I need to get me reduced down to the right size. The water will just flow right through this like it's going down a creek, and it should structure that water. So I wanted to share this with you and kind of show you some of the ideas that you see on the internet every day. And there's a ton of them. If you check on YouTube all over the place, there are a ton of people talking about structured water, how they're doing it. Some people are using marbles. Some people are using electricity. I decided I'm going to keep it simple. So I'm going with the old-fashioned rock method like you would down a stream. There is one thing I want to point out. These are polished for a reason, because I have another neighbor that also tried this system, and he didn't use polished rocks. His rocks, they were river rocks, but they had a little bit of a texture to it. That texture allowed the contamination in the water, the calcium and everything else, to build up on the little crevices all over the rocks until it built up like a biolume inside of his structured water filter. And eventually it made it through the filter into his house, and he could start seeing organic material coming through his kitchen sink, right? So that's something you got to keep in mind, is these have to be nice and smooth, just like a river rock would be. Now it's time to test it and see what it does. Hey guys, don't forget, check out the videos over there, and like and subscribe. Don't forget the notifications, and let me help this channel grow. I appreciate everybody that came by.